Hey everyone, today I'd like to talk about walled gardens in the internet. Now, for those of you who haven't been on the internet that long, before the World Wide Web and all that sort of thing, there used to be separate service providers. There used to be companies like America Online, CompuServe, Prodigy. And back in the early 90s, whenever you signed up for these services, you could only talk to people on those services. Like, for instance, back in 1990, 1991, I belonged to the service Prodigy, which I could actually go ahead and send email, but I could only send email to people who were other Prodigy members. And the same goes within AOL, CompuServe. They were pretty much walled gardens where you couldn't talk to anybody else outside of the service. Now, part of the beauty of the internet is that the internet around the mid-90s merged all of these separate mediums. All of these separate companies all went on to the internet, so they could basically start talking to each other. Here were all these different companies offering the ability to go to the same websites. And because of that, a lot of good ended up happening. There were technology that allowed you to basically go to the same site, a Google, a Yahoo, an MSN. All of those sites were accessible regardless of whatever service you were on at the time. Now, this came about because of standards. Things like HTTP, Hypertext Transfer Protocol, and HTTPS, which was the secure variant of that, were standards that pretty much any browser out there would comply to. And the thing about that is it was ultimately good because anybody who wanted to create their own browser or have their own operating system or any sort of device could go ahead and connect to the internet in a standard way. Now, starting around the mid-1990s, you'd see these private walled gardens start to crop up again, which meant that people who weren't part of this particular service could interact with people within the service. This started with AOL/AIM, for the IM, the Instant Messenger service. Only people who had signed up to AIM could actually talk to other people on the network, on the AIM network. Then there was MSN and Yahoo. And now within the last 10 years, you see these sites like Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and to a smaller degree Skype have cropped up where the only way that you can be an active participant and talk to other people on these tools and websites and services is to actually be a member of this service. It's become exclusive yet again. Now, this might sound like a complaint, which it pretty much is, and you see this all the time within other things. Like you see, for instance, in operating systems that if you have a copy of Windows, you can't run Mac programs and you can't run Linux programs within Windows. And you see the same with game consoles. You can't run Xbox games on PlayStation 3. And even on the phone, smaller degree phones. I have a iPhone, which is considered to be pretty much a walled garden, which you can't run apps, Android apps on iPhone, and vice versa. But the thing about something like the iPhone is that most of its functionality still comes from the ability to talk to anybody else with another device. The iPhone that you have, you can call somebody with an Android phone, you can text somebody with an Android phone, you can email whoever you want. And this is ultimately what makes the phone a lot more useful than only being able to do stuff to people who have other iPhones. You've seen this lately because the iPhone 4 came out with what's called FaceTime, which you can actually do video calls to other people with iPhone 4s, and it's essentially useless. The internet, I feel, is different because the internet was set up as an environment which interoperability is king, and this is starting to slowly be taken away, especially by sites like Facebook. The big problem I have with Facebook is that Facebook is basically a reinvention of the internet within the 1990s. Back in the 1990s, there were sites like GeoCities, which you could go ahead and you could set up your own personal web page. You could upload photos. You could have people contact you. What's different with Facebook is, A, it's easier. It takes almost no talent to set up your own Facebook page. And on top of that, it's also has better control when it comes to things like privacy and the ability to control who can contact you and who can't contact you. The thing about it is that it's ultimately a failure on the part of email, that if email didn't have the problem with spam and the problem of anybody being able to contact anybody else without permission first, then I wouldn't see sites like this crop up at all. Sites like Facebook, sites like Twitter, everybody would just give each other their email address once again. And the other failure with email is that email doesn't really facilitate the ability to do things like host videos and host pictures and share that with a large group of people. Now, my fear with the internet is that as these sites end up becoming bigger, the internet ends up becoming part of this walled garden. It becomes mostly this walled garden where somebody like me that doesn't participate on Facebook at all ends up being completely shut out. And somebody like me that's on Twitter and is thinking of leaving Twitter and thinking of leaving YouTube ends up being socially shut out once again. And that's really a shame, I think. But the thing about it is that I really wonder what's going to happen. What's going to happen in the next 10 years? Because the pattern that we saw before is that there were all these proprietary solutions like AOL, CompuServe, Prodigy, etc., that ended up getting supplanted by something standard. And what I wonder here is if what's going to happen is that there are going to be these sites like Friendster, MySpace, Facebook, etc., that start off in the beginning and then end up getting supplanted with something that's actually standards-based, where people end up going into that. That's what I'm hoping for, but I tend not to be particularly positive about that. Anyhow, I haven't really done a video in a while. I just wanted to really get this out and see if people have the same concern as I do for these walled gardens. Walled gardens on the internet, that is. Anyhow, thanks for watching, and maybe see you again soon.